Starting pitching. It's actually been a bright spot for the Giants this season in a year when so much has gone wrong. Carlos Rodón has been a great signing, but he can walk away at the end of the season. And the fact that they already have Rodón and they're still not good enough, what does that tell you about needing to bring someone of his caliber back, whether it's him or somebody else? So we looked at the position players last week, and now I want to look at the outlook for the Giants in terms of starting pitching for next year. Who's out there in free agency? Who's coming back? We'll get into it next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on this show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts. And coming up on today's show, as I alluded to there, I want to talk about starting pitching. I was thinking about it last night with Carlos Rodón on the mound. Wasn't a good start for him in a season where he hasn't had a lot of games like that where it wasn't a good start. He's just clearly been the Giants' best player in 2022, and yet he is set to hit the open market at the end of the year, or at least he has this opt-out, which is a slam dunk for him to exercise, assuming he remains healthy over the final month of the season. Because once he would opt out, it's 1 year, $22.5 million he would be opting out of, then he would instantly become the pitcher most likely to get the most total money in the upcoming free agent class. It's somewhat similar. Well, Kevin Gausman didn't have an opt-out, but it is remarkable that in consecutive years, the Giants will have these pitchers that they kind of picked up somewhat off the scrap heap and initially signed to either a 1 or 2 year deal in Gausman and Rodón, go out after just a year or two here, 2 in Gausman's case. I mean, 2020 if we even call it a year, and then a full 2021 for Gausman, and then Rodón just this year. They're going to go out and multiply their money that they were earning in their other total contract, the first total contract, by a lot. Gausman, he ended up getting over $100 million, and Rodón is in line to do the same. But the point that I was trying to make is that they currently have Carlos Rodón, and their record is 61 and 66. They're 5 games under 500. I think that's the exact record. I'm trying not to look at it because it's so depressing at this moment in time. We said they needed to sweep the Padres, and they lost game 1, so not a good start. But when we think about the rotation, I mean, that to me just tells me a little bit. It doesn't quite work this way because things are always different 1 year to the next, but the fact that you have Rodón now and you're not a good team, what does that mean if he walks away and you don't replace him with someone even close to as good as him? And I mean, it just tells me you would have a lot of heavy lifting to do on the position player side. And I guess that's something I would be okay with if Rodón left and they signed somebody else who was good, but not, a star and not just a slam dunk kind of front of the rotation arm. While I would probably be disappointed in that, if they invested heavily on the position player side and signed an Aaron Judge and signed a Trea Turner, if they went crazy, then okay, that's one thing. But I just think, and I've been saying this all season long, that you kind of need to replace that front of the rotation potential at least. And there are some guys who have the potential, and we'll get to them. We'll talk about them. But I just want to refresh everybody's memory about who's coming back next year, what the status is of this rotation going into 2023. So as I said, Rodón has this opt-out. Logan Webb, pretty clearly their next best pitcher, although, I mean, Alex Cobb has kind of made a run for it. With the season he's had, started off unlucky, but then the numbers have kind of stabilized in a big way recently. But for Logan Webb, he'll be entering his first year of arbitration eligibility. So Webb is under club control through the 2025 season. and that's great. And so he'll get a big pay raise from his league minimum salary roughly this season to a first year arbitration salary, probably $3 to $5 I think $1 million is what Webb will make in year one of arbitration. So that's good. Webb is back. But the Giants have more stability than just Logan Webb coming back. They do have Alex Cobb under contract for next year at $9 million, the same salary he earned this year. So for Cobb, I mean, the ERA has come down to a very respectable 3.81 after it was up in the mid sixes about a month into the season, and people were freaking out, and we kept saying the peripherals look much better. And in fact, the ERA has just continued to move towards what the peripherals were suggesting. That's kind of how this generally works. And so, I mean, Alex Cobb on a 1 year, $9 million deal, which is essentially what it'll be next year. There is actually a team option for $10 million for the year after that, and that comes with a buyout of $2 million. So actually it's $11 million guaranteed to Cobb starting next year, but it could be 2 more years of Alex Cobb. So that signing to me looks actually really good, and he will be back next year. And I just think he's been a quality starting pitcher for the Giants, and if he can be a mid to back end guy for you, that's a good thing. I think he's kind of taken over that number 3 starter, to be honest. If you have a Rodón, a Webb, and then for me, Cobb has kind of slotted in third there. Alex Wood also under contract for next year, but the story is not quite as happy for Alex Wood when we talk about the 2022 performance. It's been a step back in a big way from the very effective pitcher he was last year. This year he has an ERA of 5. The peripherals are better. So I do expect, kind of like with Alex Cobb, that over time, although there's not much time to make this up, the ERA will come down. There's not a lot suggesting that he's earned this 5 ERA or that he is it's not the performance run prevention that we would expect over a big enough sample. That being said, at the end of the day, you are what you've done, and he's allowed runs at a rate of 5 per 9 innings this year, but he's back next year and, back end starter projected into that 2023 rotation. And then Anthony DeSclafani, this one looks kind of like a mistake as well, perhaps. They gave him the longest term of any of these starters, a 3-year deal for $36 million, and year one was this year, and it just didn't go well. The last year was a 1-year deal, and then they signed him to a 3-year extension, and year one was just a completely lost year for him. But they hope that he's going to be back next year, and hopefully he can look more like the 2021 version of DeSclafani when he was very good. So he'll be a factor next year. And then Jakob Junis, who's established himself as a swing guy. He can start. He could potentially be like a long reliever or like a bulk innings reliever, whatever they call them now. But he is under club control for next year, and I think he's earned the right to be a guy that will be retained for next year, small raise to his salary likely. So he'll probably get around $3 million, but he's been clearly a pretty solid addition for the Giants and a nice kind of flexible piece for them moving into 2023. But what about that void that could be left by potentially the departure of Carlos Rodón? So we're going to talk about Rodón himself and if the Giants should bring him back and what that contract would be, and then some of the other options out there for the San Francisco Giants for their starting rotation next year. But first, as you gear up for fall, you need the right people on your team to help your small business fire on all cylinders. LinkedIn Jobs is here to make it easier to find the people you want to talk to faster and for free. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience, so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs number 1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Did you know that every week nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonmlb. That's linkedin.com/lockedonmlb to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, as promised, I want to talk about the kind of outlook for the offseason in terms of who's available in free agency among starting pitchers. So Carlos Rodón is kind of in a class by himself. When I look at guys who are very likely to reach free agency, there are some guys who have like player options. I guess Rodon's is actually a player option, but we look at a guy like Justin Verlander. He's got a $25 million player option. I think that he'll pick it up because of his age. He's not going to get a long-term deal like Rodón could potentially get. And so Dan Szymborski over at Fangraphs, who runs the Zips projection systems, he created the Zips projection system. He recently wrote about Carlos Rodón's potential dip into the free agent market and what he could get, and that he would very likely be the best pitcher available. He clarifies, like, Jakob deGrom is very likely to reach free agency. He keeps saying that he's going to opt out, and a deGrom who reaches the free agent market, he's the best arm available, but it's a different kind of deal. So Szymborski suggests that deGrom might get something like 2 years, $85 million, or 2 years, $90 million. And to me, that's actually very attractive and in line with the San Francisco Giants have looked for in their free agent pitcher deals. Like, I think that the Giants would be one of the teams super interested in Jakob deGrom on a 2-year deal, because I really do believe that it's the years that scare them off when it comes to these starting pitchers. We heard last year that the Giants didn't even make Kevin Gausman an offer, and I think that had a lot to do with knowing that that they were trying to maximize total guaranteed money. And if you're trying to maximize total guaranteed money, you're not going to offer a 2-year deal, because you're just not going to be able to match the total money of a 5-year deal with a 2-year deal. And if you do, you might as well spread it out a little more over 5 years, in my opinion, than give it over 2 years. So 2 years, $85 million or $90 million, it's crazy, but it actually makes a lot of sense for someone like Jakob deGrom, who's just become far and away the best player in the game, pitcher in the game, I should say, when he's been on the field. Being on the field has been an issue, but when he's on the field, he's the best pitcher in baseball. And I think ultimately the Mets and their new owner are going to be the team that gives him that type of deal. And so I would kind of assume he goes elsewhere. And that's, again, why I keep coming back to Rodón being maybe the Giants' best chance to replace Rodón is with Rodón himself, because a lot of these names, as we'll see, there's just reason to suspect that they would end up elsewhere. So for deGrom, the owner of the Mets is like, he gave Max Scherzer this type of deal. Scherzer got, 3 years, $130 million, like a crazy high AAV over a short term that exceeded what was expected by quite a bit, because I think their owner was just willing to overextend a little bit. And why wouldn't you do the same for a franchise icon like deGrom? But anyway, getting back to Rodón, the projection, for what it's worth, is that he'll stay good, and that over the next 5 years, he'll, even in year 5, be a 3-WAR pitcher, which is still solidly above average. It comes in, the projection is a 3.23 ERA in year 5, 3.03 next year, and then kind of increasing up to 3.23 with fewer and fewer starts every year, 22 starts in the final year of the projection. But look, these are just projections, and you can't know this at all. And he could have a serious arm injury and miss a year and a half. And that's kind of the risk, and then underperformance. But anyway, Szymborski's projection system suggests 4 years, $119 million for Carlos Rodón. And Szymborski says it feels like a lot, but may very well be attainable in a market that isn't exactly overflowing with quality pitchers. So he's right, as we'll continue to look through. You've got deGrom, you've got Rodón. For 4 years, $119 million, that's about $30 million a year. I like the fact that it's 4 years and not 5. And we've also heard some inklings that, like Mike Krukow, I just read an article, I didn't actually hear the interview, but I guess he was calling into KNBR, as he does all the time, and was kind of hinting at that the Giants are trying to extend Rodón. So I'll have to verify that. It kind of really opened my eyes to see that. I hadn't heard anything about that, but, Krukow he talks to the players, and so I'm sure he talks to the front office, he talks to Larry Baer, so Krukow has inside information sometimes, And I thought that was interesting. But then he also said Rodón would be crazy not to test the open market, and he's earned that right. And he has. So we'll see. And the other factor is that the Giants can give Carlos Rodón the qualifying offer, which hurts his free agency if he signs with another team. It makes the Giants uniquely positioned to be the best team able to re-sign him, because other teams would surrender a draft pick to the Giants by signing him, but the Giants wouldn't surrender a draft pick to themselves. He will reject the qualifying offer if he gets it, because he would have already rejected the player option, which will be worth more than the qualifying offer. So it would just be a total formality, no-brainer decision. But still, I really do think that over 4 years, it's possibly worth bringing back Rodón because of what I just said. They're not that good with him. Then they've got even more of a climb to get out of the hole they've dug for themselves if they don't bring him back. So we'll see. I also felt like I wanted to see them bring back Gausman, and they just didn't. And I was a little surprised by how he said they didn't even make him an offer. So coming up in just a minute, we're going to look at the rest of the free agent class. As Zimborski noted, as I noted, it's just not that strong of a class, but there are some intriguing names out there that if the Giants invest heavily on the position player side, I would be okay with bringing in one or two of these guys. And we've also got to keep in mind, you want to create opportunities potentially for a guy like Kyle Harrison. You don't necessarily want a totally full starting rotation that doesn't allow you to break in some young talent as well. So more of that in just a minute. But first, all right, as promised, we are going to talk about the rest of the free agent class. I've kind of put them into different categories, Rodón being in a category by himself, and the next category is underrated LA lefties. And that does not include Clayton Kershaw, who is a free agent. He falls into this other category that is basically big dogs but unlikely, basically, or unlikely for obvious reasons is what I wrote. But the underrated LA lefties are Andrew Heaney and Tyler Anderson. What irks me a little bit about Tyler Anderson is that the Giants had this guy, and he was there in 2020, and I thought that they should bring him back. He was arbitration eligible, but they non-tendered him. He was on a couple different teams last year, and it wasn't a very good year. But then on the Dodgers this year, Tyler Anderson has a 2.69 ERA, a 3.26 fielding independent pitching, 3.14 expected ERA. He's just been extremely solid, kind of just like the best version of himself. And that's just another example of the Dodgers and their player development machine being superior not only to the Giants, but to the rest of the league. And so why didn't the Giants get the best out of Tyler Anderson? I really do believe it has something to do with the change in the baseball. There's like been if you look at a lot of guys like Tyler Anderson, just not heavy strikeout guys, but more command and finesse guys. Think of Merrill Kelly, who's having an excellent year, but has had his struggles in the last few years. But this year, much better. And I really do believe that the baseball being different and more deadened, and we've seen a big decrease in home runs. That's the thing. Guys like this, if you're also giving up home runs, that's a big problem. But if you're suddenly like really good at suppressing homers and you're not allowing walks, it's kind of a recipe for a great season, which is what Tyler Anderson is doing. So he's an intriguing guy. Not exactly the guy I would break the bank for, but certainly a guy that would be a nice, solid addition if you picked him up, I think. Andrew Heaney is the other underrated lefty, just having a really impressive season in a very different way with strikeouts and overpowering. 35% strikeout rate. Another example of the Dodgers player development being really good, player development system, because Heaney never had good results with the Angels, was traded to the Yankees last summer and didn't have good results there either. Goes to the Dodgers. He's been hurt a lot, but in 41 and 2/3 innings, he has a 1.94 ERA, a career best strikeout rate, a career low walk rate, or almost a career. No, it's right in line with his career average. I stand corrected there, but the strikeout stuff and limiting homers. And again, it could be the baseball, but career 1.58 home runs per 9. This year, 1.08, and that is the best he's had in a season since 2015, when his strikeout rate was 17.8%. And this year, again, 35%. So he doubled the strikeout rate and got close to that career best in home run prevention. So he's just been a super intriguing arm, has been injured, but a guy, again, I would be intrigued if the Giants picked him up, and could be a nice, underrated, but good arm. So the next category is solid, and that includes Chris Bassett, formerly of the Oakland A's, traded to the New York Mets. Kind of an underrated player, similar to what I was saying about Tyler Anderson. Funky, command specialist, doesn't allow a lot of home runs, but he never did, even when the ball was more juiced. But career 3.44 ERA, this year 3.34, so just a solid arm. Has been pretty durable as well, underrated, Bay Area ties, so I could see the Giants having interest in Chris Bassett. He is 33 years old, but solid. That's what I'll say about him. Mike Clevenger, we just saw him last night. He's had a lot of injuries in his career, missed a lot of time in the last few years, but some of the stuff looks a little bit alarming, and like the strikeout rate is a career low. And so I'm not super in on Mike Clevenger, but he's a name who's out there, could be a guy worth taking a flyer on, having a pretty solid year when he's been on the field this year. And then we've got some guys having down years, like Nathan Ivaldi. Last year was very good. The year before that, very good. But in 2022, he's taken a step back, but could be a guy worth a look for, hoping for a rebound. And then there's Sean Manaya, definitely a down year guy. I would kind of steer clear. The dude has a 4.90 ERA this season with the Padres. Padres haven't been great with kind of pitcher development, so it could be a lot worse. I'm talking about the Giants didn't do great with Tyler Anderson or whatever, and that they didn't bring him back, and now he goes to the Dodgers and then is really good. But they've had a lot of success stories, like turning Logan Webb into what he is, Kevin Gausman, DeSclafani a couple years ago, Alex Cobb, and Rodón, of course. Drew Smyly was good when he was here. So the Giants have done a pretty good job developing pitchers. But the Padres haven't, and Sean Manaya taking a big step back is an example of that. So another guy with Bay Area ties, I would be intrigued on some cheap one-year deal, maybe try to fix him. But it's not been a good year for Manaya. So then there's the guys who are unlikely. I guess Jameson Taillon I'd put into the solid category. I'd like to see what he could do outside of the bandbox of New York. I think that he would probably fit in a ballpark like Oracle much better. Not a big strikeout guy, but command artist and can get a ground ball as well. So then the big dogs who are unlikely. Justin Verlander, as I said, he is going to be 40 years old in February. So I think a one-year deal for $25 million on a good team like the Astros is probably what's going to end up happening for him. I wouldn't expect him to come to the Giants, but very good pitcher. I'd like to see him come to the Giants. I just don't think it's realistic. And then Clayton Kershaw, I said this last offseason, I'll say it again now. I just don't see him playing for anyone but the Dodgers. Maybe the Texas Rangers, where he's from Texas, so maybe being close to home. But going to the Giants, kind of tainting his legacy a little bit, given that he's an LA guy through and through in terms of his whole career he spent with the Dodgers. I just don't see it. But he's good, and he'll be a free agent again. Charlie Morton wants to be on the East Coast, older, kind of declining, so I don't see it. Luis Severino there's a club option for $15 million, and I bet you that the Yankees pick that up. If they don't, he's an intriguing guy that I'd like to see the Giants take a look on, but I doubt he reaches free agency. So anyway, that was kind of a thorough look at who I see as some of the most obvious arms in some ways and in some different categories. But at the end of the day, they got to invest in the team, whether it's Rodón or not Rodón, and then some of the other arms, but then invest heavily in the position player side. They're going to have to do it. They have so much money coming off the books. It's not like they can't do it. Even with Rodón, they only have about $90 million committed to next year's team. It's a little less than that, I believe, but I think it's like 89. So there's no excuse really. So we will be covering it all off season long, but hey, there's still baseball in September and the last couple days of August. So we will be back tomorrow, continuing to provide daily updates on the San Francisco Giants. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen today. Now make your second listen the Locked On MLB podcast. MLB expert Paul Francis Sullivan brings humor, passion, and unique perspective on every team and the biggest stories around the league. Follow the #1 daily league-wide podcast, Locked On MLB, on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get podcasts. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out a lot, so thanks in advance. And thank you to everyone who's done so already. I can't wait to be with you again tomorrow. Thanks again for listening. You are now Locked On Giants.